I'd like to welcome everybody that's joining us. This is a first of something we're gonna try to continue. We're kind of brainstorming a little bit about what a good way to be, what a good way to go would be to communicate with people, and I think everybody's pretty much inundated with webinars on either funding from the government or COVID related this and that. And so we didn't just want to be another one of those. So we thought of this idea of just being able to answer people's technical questions. So that's because that's what we do. So this is kind of what we came up with. So we're hoping this is valuable to people. And, we are going to just basically read questions that either people have sent to us or questions that people submit while we're on this, and I'm going to just try to answer them. So I want to just get that started here. So anyway, welcome everybody. I think probably the best thing to start with is that Greg is going to read off the questions that are either coming in or ones that were already submitted, and I'm just going to respond and try to answer them. So I guess, Greg, if we want to just get started.
So the first question that we have is, what are the most common threats that people need to look out for regarding IT?
So really, the most common threats, there's probably, from statistics that we've read, that about 91 or even higher percentage of all infections out there come from somebody clicking on something they shouldn't. And really the most common thing that people need to watch out for is links in emails. That's probably the most common. And that's where, the cybersecurity training is kind of really important. If you don't really know how to analyze or look at the links in emails to see if they don't look right, or there's always a risk. You're never going to be 100%, but and hackers are getting very creative. But looking at links in emails by hovering over the link and just looking at what comes up, if it looks weird or it doesn't seem to correspond with what the email that you're reading, and it comes from some crazy domain name, especially something that sounds like it might be in some other country, or then it's probably not something you want to be clicking on. Another common thing is people just browsing around. They're searching for something on Google or one of the search engines, and they'll click onto a website that is an infected website. There's a lot of websites out there that are sort of bait for people, and so it's just, you can get in. So it's, one of the things that we try to security awareness training is just those types of things. We show like examples in there of different things that can come in, because the hackers are creative. It will probably look like an Amazon email you get. It'll look like something you get from UPS or anything. That they try to get very creative and catch you off guard. Most of the things that are with security these days, like, they are really just trying to catch you off guard, do something to catch you in a state where you panic in some way, even if it's for a second, and you don't think and you click on something, and that's all it takes. So those are really the most common things. A lot of other things come more from targeted attacks, where you're working for a company that's being targeted. So I think that would probably be my answer to that question. So what's the next one?
So what is the cloud and how does it work?
So the cloud is really just, it just means something out on the internet. So the cloud is something you're connecting to through your internet connection. So the cloud is a very general term. There actually probably is not a great definition of it anywhere. But when you hear someone saying it's in the cloud, that just means it's not on your local network. You're getting to it through an internet connection. Really, what the cloud is lots and lots of different services and apps and things that you connect to, which are really just run on servers and data centers. And it's actually very complex how you actually get to all of that stuff. That's kind of more for an IT professional, but it's really just means that it's out there someplace else. And so examples of that is Office 365 or Google Apps. That's out in the cloud, but that's all you're really doing when you go to Office 365 is you're connecting to servers that Microsoft is hosting. When you go to Google Apps, you're going to servers that Google is hosting. It's all in their data centers. But it can be small things too. You can have a small company, like we actually have a few things hosted ourselves for remote control tools or things that are portal or things like that. Those are on a much smaller scale, but those are still considered out in the cloud in their cloud applications. So the reality is the cloud these days, it's great because it's very convenient. You can get to anything on almost any device, and I'm a huge proponent of the cloud, but it has changed things too. So you're now out there in a more unsafe place. The days of just connecting to your local server and protecting the edge in a sense that with the firewall, like your connection to the internet, that always kept you safe. Now when you're out there on the cloud, it's actually, you got to be very careful because so is the hackers are out there on the cloud too. So it's a constant kind of game and cat and mouse with different security companies to try to battle this. So didn't expect that this was gonna turn on, but hold on. Like a humidifier behind me here. So yeah, so I think that's my explanation of what the cloud is. So what's the next question?
How old of a computer will still run Windows 10?
That's a really good question. That's something that we get that question a lot. It's really, there is no age that there's no specific age saying, oh, if your computer's older than 5 years, it won't run Windows 10. The older it is, the potential higher, it'll be more likely it might not be compatible, but it is really something that's more about performance. So if you have a, say, 6 or 7 year old computer that was really fast when you bought it and it was fairly expensive, it probably will still work fine. I think the best recommendation that we give people is if you can't afford to replace your computer and you really need to kind of hang on to it, investing in an SSD drive, or that stands for solid state drive. You probably need an IT professional to swap that out for you and transfer the information, but those drives are $100 or less anymore, depending on the size that you buy, and it can really revive an old computer. A Windows 10 running on a computer of any age with SSD is actually pretty darn good performance. So that's kind of been our recommendation. If you have to keep and hold on to your old computer, the SSD drive is probably the best bang for your buck to continue to do that. So I think that's my answer for that.
We have another submitted question, and this one asks, are all browsers safe? Why or why not?
Okay, so really, I would probably start that answer with a browser is always needing to be updated. So hackers are always going after vulnerabilities in any software, but specifically web browsers. So if you're using say Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge, Internet Explorer is still okay, but they aren't updating that anymore. That's considered end of life. Then there's Mozilla Firefox, and then also the Apple Safari, which that primarily runs on Macs, but all of those are very safe. You just keep up on updates. You let Windows update your computer, that it will push out updates to those browsers. The browsers will update themselves. Those are pretty safe. There's no such thing as 100%, but some of the other ones that are out there, they don't have as many dollars behind them. So there's a higher chance that those could be less safe, but most web browsers these days are pretty safe. They're constantly battling and putting protections in place to try to keep the users safe.
All right. If I was going to buy a computer, what specs should I look for?
So that's a really good question. I actually get that asked a lot. They we'll start with we'll just say like on the corporate side. There are two different, in a sense, versions of computers. There's commercial grade computers, like with Dell, that's their Latitude and their Optiplex brand. And Dell, for the consumer side, there's a whole consumer line to most vendors, and so for Dell, I'm most familiar with them because that's what we sell. That's their Inspiron line. They have a couple others, but that's primarily Inspiron is their home line. And so let's say you're a home user and you're just trying to get a laptop for your house, and you go out to Best Buy. One of the things you have to look at is they try to, and everything with on the consumer side, it's always about price. So they're always trying to sell you a computer that, oh, this one's only $300 or $400, and you think that's really cheap. The things to look for in those specs, so you can sometimes get inexpensive computers that have these specs. So don't let the price say, oh, it's terrible because it's too cheap. But the things you want to look for is, generally you want, for the processor, it'll be Intel or AMD. If it's Intel, it's an i5 or an i3 or an i7. i5 and i7 are definitely better. So you want to try to stick with i5 or i7. Processor isn't a critical thing, but generally that's what you're looking for there. For RAM, that's another major spec that will be on the spec sheet. Generally these days you want 8 gigabytes or more. If it's 2 gigabytes or 4 gigabytes, you might have some performance issues. And then the third and really most important is the hard drive. The hard drive, you're going to base it off of the size that you need. So they start anywhere from 256 gigabytes up to 4, 6, 8 terabytes. So they kind of range. But this is where even the recommendation I just had for the reviving an older computer, the SSD drive is still important with new computers. It does raise the price of a newer computer a little bit, but you will notice it's a very noticeable performance difference with an SSD versus anything else. If you're not going to get an SSD and you're still looking for an inexpensive computer, one of the most important things to look for then is the speed of the hard drive. So you'll see something on the spec sheet that'll say a number and it'll say RPM. And what that means is rounds per minute. That's the speed that the hard drive is spinning at. So one of the things I see a lot when I'm looking at stuff, and especially on the consumer side, is a 5,400 RPM drive. Do not get that. That is an old hard drive. They're very inexpensive, but they're very slow. So 7,200 RPM is okay. Not anywhere near the performance of an SSD drive, but if you see 7,200 there, you're okay. But just don't go for the 5,400. You'll pay all this money for the RAM and the processor, and the thing's still going to be slow. I've had that where some people have come to me and they bought that, and I recommended just putting an SSD drive in the computer, and it was like night and day difference. So that's my biggest recommendation there.
Can you explain the difference between a secure and a non-secure browser session?
So for a secure browser session, it's the biggest thing to look for there, and every browser kind of portrays it a little bit differently. But the biggest thing to look at is you have at the top of the screen, you have where it's called your URL. It's the link. It's the way you can. That's the website you're actually going to. So if you look up in there, the first thing you'll see in that is it'll be HTTP:// or HTTPS. The biggest thing to know there is HTTPS. It means it's secure. HTTP means that it's not secure. So, and if it's just HTTP, anybody out on the internet can sniff your traffic. They can see everything you're typing. And not that this is easy. Hackers kind of need to do it, but it's not secure. It's not encrypted. And that's S means that it's secure, but S also, the reason it's secure is because it's encrypted from your browser to wherever the destination is. So that's really the biggest thing to look for is, and a lot of browsers have little different symbols. Like a lot of them will have a little picture of a lock if it's HTTPS, and it'll be the lock is unlocked in the picture if it's not secure, meaning it's HTTP. So that's the biggest thing to look for there is it's HTTP or HTTPS in front of that. The rest of it doesn't matter. But if you see HTTPS, then you're generally safe.
Okay, next question. How can I print at home if I'm remoted into my computer that's at work?
So that's actually not that simple. Sometimes it just works, honestly. Like it's very dependent on how you're connecting. So there's lots of ways to connect into your computer at work. You can have a thing called remote desktop. And if you're going to connect securely with remote desktop, you're going to be connecting through something they call a remote desktop gateway. You can also connect through something called VPN, that stands for virtual private network. Those are generally corporate type connections. You don't see many home users doing things like that. But it really is very dependent. If you're using, say, remote desktop, the software, there is configurations for that software that you can tell it to share your local printer at home. The reality is it doesn't actually work with all printers. So a lot of times sometimes it just works for people because they have the right printer and it just picked up on it. But other times it just will never work with that printer. Other times, we get help desk support tickets for that, and we can sometimes make it work through a lot of different tricks and things, but it's generally not that simple. There's other ways that you're remoting in. Let's say it's your home computer and you want to remote in from work and you want to be able to print to work from your home computer. There's a lot of times people will use services like Log Me In 123 or just Log Me In general. They have several different services. The Team Viewer is another popular one. There's lots of them out there. A lot of times those will work better with printers because they're kind of designed to be user friendly. But the reality is not all printers work. So that isn't always a simple thing to accomplish. So, just know that if it's working for you, great, just continue to use it. But if you're having trouble, you might have to reach out to someone in IT to help you.
Okay. Another question is, how can I close a program if I'm stuck and I'm remoted into work?
So if you're remoted into your computer, there's a couple ways. A lot of times people will, there's a thing called Task Manager, and pretty much any version of Windows has that. Macs have it a little bit different. They have a thing called Force Close, and it brings up a window of all the applications that are running. But generally, if it's a Windows computer, you're going to close things through a program called Task Manager. And a lot of people are used to that. That's how they are bringing that up. But then they get home and they realize when I hit Control-Alt-Delete to bring up the little menu that lets me into Task Manager, it's actually bringing that up on my home computer. And so one of the tricks there is if you're remoted into your computer and you use Control-Alt and the End key instead of Control-Alt and the Delete key, Control-Alt that same screen on your remote computer, Task Manager, and do what you normally do. There is another way too, if that's not working for you. Down at the taskbar, which is all the way at the bottom where your start button is and all your applications where it shows they're running, if you right click on that, someplace where there's not already something running, just kind of a blank area of that, that menu that will pop up when you right click on the taskbar will usually have the word, it'll say Task Manager in there, and you can bring it up that way as well.
Okay, another question that came in is, can I email my password to someone? Or rather, should I email my password to someone?
So definitely not. That's if you're sending a standard email, one of the things we've said to people for years is if you're going to email something to somebody, you should feel confident that even if it was on a billboard, you probably would feel you wouldn't worry about that. So anytime you email something, it's in what they call plain text. There's no encryption to email. It's a very old technology that hasn't changed dramatically. All the security that's been put onto email is just adaptations to trying to make it more secure. But email is not secure by default by any means. So if you're sending an email to somebody and it's going across the internet to, which pretty much is every email, it's not secure at all. So anybody could sniff that traffic. Hackers are always looking for that types of things. They're actually monitoring email traffic pretty regularly and looking for keywords. So it's possible that if you have password and then your actual password in there, they'll pick up on the fact that, hey, someone sent an email with the word password in it, capture that information for me. So, and that goes for social security numbers, credit card numbers, anything that needs to be secure, they monitor for that stuff. So it's definitely not secure to email a password. Most email systems, or there's lots of, there's lots of solutions out there that work with email systems, and it's called mail encryption. So it's generally a service that you subscribe to, and then you have the ability to send the message securely because it encrypts the email. There's lots of different ways that actually is accomplished. I'm not going to get too technical here, but it's safe to email all of that type of information if you're using a mail encryption service. But that's something you pay for. It's very, I've never actually seen it where it's free.
Dave, you had mentioned about Control Alt End earlier in the answer to that question. Can you repeat that because it seemed to cut out of the feed?
Oh, okay. So, yeah. So when you're bringing up to bring up Task Manager, a lot of times people are used to Control Alt Delete, and if you just use Control Alt and the End key on the keyboard, that will execute the same command, the Control Delete, on the remote computer, and then you'll see the screen pop up. You can click on Task Manager, and it'll bring that up. So it's really a matter of it's just a different key sequence to bring that up on the local PC. And then if that's not working for you, you can right click down on the taskbar and Task Manager will be in the menu that pops up too. So that's another option.
Okay, thank you. So we hear all the time that you're not supposed to use the same password at multiple websites. Do you have a recommendation on the best way to keep track of all of them?
Yeah, that's definitely a very good practice to get into. It's extremely common that people use the same password for everything, especially a long time ago. I think people are changing their methods now because of everything that's going on in the world, not even just today, but just in general with all the activity of security hacking and things. But if you use a different password for every single site that you go to or every different application, the reason you want to do that is because let's say like LinkedIn was hacked years ago. It was I think they're much more secure now and they're owned by Microsoft, but that was one of the original hacks that was done, and every single person's password was released from that hack. And so let's say, for example, LinkedIn did get hacked again, and that same thing happened again. If your LinkedIn password is not the same as any other password you have, well, yeah, someone might be able to get into your LinkedIn account, but you change that password and you're safe. So that's the biggest reason is it's not so much that someone would guess your password. It's really just a matter of you don't have to worry about it because they only got that one password for that one site. If you use the same password for everything, they can now start figuring out where's your bank, and they're going to try that same password. We have a service called dark web scanning, where we actually scan the dark web and get passwords for anything that's out there and try to let our clients know that don't use this password anywhere because anybody can get it very easily. So that's the biggest recommendation. So a way to make that easier, because I mean, I think most people have probably a minimum of at least 20 different passwords, up to hundreds that they would have to remember, which would be impossible. So that's where these password vaults or password managers come into play. We typically recommend LastPass to most of our clients. There's lots of them out there. LastPass is probably, in a sense, the most popular and biggest one out there. But any of them are generally pretty good because they're everything they store. Everything's encrypted. So I personally been using LastPass for probably 2 to 3 years now, and I think I probably have 200 to 300 different passwords in there, and every one of them is different. So it's that's a practice I've been using for a long time.
Here's another great question. Is it safe to take all those fun Facebook quizzes or anything on social media for that matter?
Yeah, I would say absolutely not. Most of those Facebook quizzes, I mean, most of them are innocent. They're out there from people that aren't trying to hack into you. But there's a lot of hackers that put that stuff out there, and they're just trying to in a sense, put bait out there for people to give them their personal information. But even if it isn't something that maybe it's a perfectly normal company, they're safe, they're not trying to gather your information and distribute it to anybody, that information can be intercepted. It's not safe to give your personal information out anywhere, but it's an extremely common practice for hackers when they're trying to it's all forms of phishing. So phishing means they're just trying to phish you for information. It's so common that people know of it as phishing emails, but there's all kinds of phishing that's being done on all kinds of social media. And so it's all a form of someone trying to get your information. Sometimes it's innocent information. I mean, they're not going to just come right out and say, oh, what's your credit card number? Or what's your social security number? A lot of times it's asking a question in a way that they can deduce the answer, and just catch you off guard. That's what all hacking is about. It's about catching people off guard. So it's you really don't want to give information like that to anybody. There's no real reason they need it.
Okay, next question, and I think this is something we can all relate to, no matter what level we use a computer. But is there an easy way to tell if an email is spam?
So really, so that the answer to that, I kind of break it up into two parts. So spam just means it's a message you don't want to get. It's just something, that generally when spam became a really big thing, it was because people were just sending just marketing information and all kinds of things to people. And they're like, I don't want this. I didn't sign up for this. I don't care about this product. That's really what spam is. And spam isn't necessarily dangerous. But then as things started changing, all of a sudden now it became malware and dangerous things. And so there's dangerous emails and there's not dangerous emails. Generally, spam is just a definition for things that you don't want. And obviously you don't want the malware and all the dangerous messages, but a lot of times you don't want the ones that aren't dangerous. So it's really a matter of spam in general is just messages you don't want. And most people, if you don't have some sort of spam filtering, and there's lots of, like if you have Gmail, like you get it as included in your service. But if you have your own mail service, a lot of times you have to subscribe to a spam filtering service. You kind of need those these days, because people that have had email addresses for many, many, many years. I know for me, I think I would probably get 500 or 600 messages in my mailbox every day if I didn't have spam filtering. So it's really spam filtering is a way to cut down on how much email you get. But all spam services now have security filtering in it. So they're looking for dangerous emails and trying to block those from coming in, which is really, that's the more important part of it. The spam filtering service that we actually use just recently released a feature where it's called link sandboxing or link redirection. What it does is it replaces the links in every email that comes through it And when someone clicks on a link in an email, it actually redirects it to what they call their sandbox. It's an isolated testing environment to see if that link is going someplace dangerous or if it's actually going where it said it's supposed to go to. And so it's never perfect, but it's a whole nother layer that really can protect people if they accidentally click on something. Generally, you don't get that type of service with something that's inexpensive, but I'm really excited to see that feature's here.
Excellent. And I know you alluded to in a previous question about RPMs, but are there other ways that one can make their computer run faster?
So I'll kind of break it up a little bit into saying, okay, your computer could run slower because it's older, and it could be because you have a slow hard drive, like I was saying with the 5,400 RPM drives. It could be because of that. But a lot of times, if you've had a computer for a long time, I would say almost every computer, mostly Windows computers, probably even more than Macs, they become slower over time. And the reasons for that, some of it, I don't think any of us really completely know every reason, but one of the most common reasons is because everything you do on the computer is generally building up a log file or temp files or different things that just build up on the computer. And so what happens is, you probably may have heard over the years, like, when someone says your computer is slow, clean up your temp files. There's lots of little tools you can buy from lots of companies that do those cleanups for you. Even Windows has some built-in things where you can do just a cleanup. But generally what makes it slower is those things build up and build up and build up. And then every time you try to execute something, it has to look through that stuff, and it just becomes slower and slower and slower over time. So you'll notice that you could have the same computer and you just wipe your computer, or someone does it for you, you wipe your computer and reload it, and all of a sudden that same computer with all the same hardware is much, much, much faster. So in general, the recommendation I can give people is to get some sort of tool that cleans that stuff up for you, because there's lots of little places, and unless you're really an IT professional, you probably don't know how to get to all those places. If you don't want to buy something as cleaning up your temp files, which Windows has ways to do that, that's one of the easiest ways to do it. So it can make a difference. So that's probably my best recommendation is computers do get slower over time. So a wipe and reload, if you know somebody that can do that for you, or you can do it yourself, that makes a huge difference. But little things like the cleanup tools and temp files can actually make a big difference too.
This is going to be our last question that has been submitted, and then we welcome anyone that has joined to add in any questions that they have. But the last question is going to be, is Zoom really safe?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know there's a lot going on out there about circulation that Zoom got hacked, and there's so many different perspectives. People say Zoom got hacked. People say Zoom is insecure, and really, I think Zoom is by far the most popular thing right now. I mean, Zoom is not even that old of a company compared to other companies that have been doing this for much longer. But they were one of the easiest, and I think it really just caught on. And now all you hear with everybody staying home is Zoom meeting, Zoom meeting. So it's extremely popular, and I think it almost took Zoom, the company, by surprise. So they've been investing heavily in this, and they obviously know that this is all going on out there. So they've been. I just saw a thing the other day that someone had they I forget actually which company it was from, but they hired a security expert from it was one of the major companies. I forget which one it was, but they hired them to just make sure they're putting every bit of effort they can into securing it. But from what I was able to read, they never really were that insecure. What's happening is it's a kind of a new term everybody's saying now called Zoom bombing. And so what it is it's hackers, and it doesn't have to be hackers that are super talented. It's just people want to cause trouble they have ways of figuring out, and because a lot of these links that people are, they weren't submitted through HTTPS, or they weren't secure, figure out the meeting code that people connected to, and they just join right into the meeting, and they go in and they start swearing, and it's been a real problem because of schools. You know, if adults are talking and someone comes in and starts swearing and saying things or putting things up on the screen that are rude and things, you know, they're adults, they can just end the meeting and figure something else out. But when you had a whole classroom of school kids that are young, that's a really big issue. So that's what's been happening. So what Zoom did to almost immediately within a day or two of this happening, they went through every account and required all existing meetings to have a password on them. They've always had the feature to put passwords on these meetings. It wasn't the default, so people didn't click it. They didn't do anything. It just seemed like an inconvenience. So now they're pretty much, it's the default setting. You can turn it off, but if you're just creating an email now, it will put a password on every single link. And if people are wondering, like, well, how do I know if there's a password on this? What you would see before is you would see a link that someone would send you, and it would say something about Zoom, and then it would have a meeting number behind it. And it was generally a fairly short, like, you know, under 10 to 12 digits or something. And it was, you know, that was the meeting code. It was just plain text. Now what they do is they actually put the fully encrypted password in the link too. So you'll see that that link is now significantly longer, with probably 50 or 60 random letters and numbers. That's called a hash. That's how you connect. So that can't be intercepted by people easily. And I mean, I can't say it's impossible, but for the most part, that tells you there's a password on that meeting, and that meeting is secure. No one's going to be hacking into that and doing Zoom bombing. But you know, the one thing that I want to be clear about is I have read nothing about Zoom being hacked successfully and people stealing usernames and passwords and things. There was an article I read saying that it was hacked and user information was leaked, but from what I was able to tell, it was like maybe names of people, but it wasn't their passwords. So there's all kinds of things out there, and you really can't always trust what you see in the media anyway. So it's just, you know, the reality is there's nothing that's 100% secure, but in my opinion, I don't think Zoom is any more or less secure than any of the other platforms out there.
Thank you. It looks like we got another question from the live audience. And that question is, will antivirus software work on home PCs?
So that's a good, I mean, the answer in general is yes. Antivirus software will work on any PC. There's generally within any software vendor or any antivirus software vendor, they a lot of times have a home version and a corporate version. One of the biggest differences there is the corporate versions usually talk back to some sort of console so that they can be centrally managed, and IT professionals can push out software and updates and monitor that things are working and be notified if hacks, you know, if a file gets infected or things like that. None of those features are built into the home users versions. So pretty much, I think every company out there that sells antivirus software has a home version. So you can really load on whatever someone's recommending to you or what you've heard of, or, you know, there are some that are better than others. I really don't have huge opinions of them all, but I know one thing that a lot of people ask me too is, well, I don't have the money to pay for this, or I don't want to pay for this. If you have Windows 10, it comes, if you load Windows 10 and you never loaded any antivirus software on that, there's a thing called Microsoft Security Essentials that automatically gets loaded. If you have antivirus software on your PC and you uninstall it off the PC, it will actually, the Windows Defender, Windows Security Essentials, it will actually enable itself and protect you. In Windows 7, it was called Windows Defender. That's where, so Windows Defender was something you had to load onto Windows 7. But it's that's something that it was a free antivirus that Microsoft distributed and was pretty decent. You can generally get the same security protection at home that you can through corporate. So it's something that Windows 10 is definitely much more secure in a lot of ways, but and Windows 7 is end of life. So if anybody's still using Windows 7, my recommendation is don't. It's only a matter of time till someone takes advantage of that. It's not being updated anymore, and it's not something you want to continue to use unless you absolutely have to. And then you really shouldn't be going on the internet with it, and you shouldn't be receiving any email on it, because those are the most common ways that people will try to get in, hack you or something like that. So
It looks like that's all we have for current questions. We'd like to open up if there's some time to our live audience, or if that's anything, if there's anything more to talk about. If not, that looks like it's every question that was asked.
Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing here, I guess all the questions were asked. So I just want to thank everybody. If you're tuning in, this is something that we're going to try to continually do each week and see if we're able to help people. That's kind of been one of our core values at the company. It's one of my core values, and it's really, we just like to help people. So we're hoping this is kind of a different way we can help people. And, it seems like you have lots of places to turn to find information about COVID and PPP loans and all these different things going on. So this is hopefully something different, and we're hoping we're able to make a difference for people. So any feedback we can get from people, we'd love to hear it. And we're going to do this again next week. So we'll see you then. Thanks.